Joining me now is His Excellency Ambassador of Mexico. So thank you so much for speaking to CNN News 18.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So we all are excited for the G20 Leaders Summit. Perhaps Mexico is going to be represented by the economic minister, trade minister. Sir, India has put forth a very ambitious, inclusive, balanced, sustainable model before for this G20 leaders meet agenda before for this G20 leaders meet. How does Mexico look at India's agenda, and does Mexico support India's presidency and perhaps the agendas that India has put forth?
Yeah, no, we have been very supportive of Indians' priorities in the agenda for the G20. Along with the, when the working groups took place, when the ministerial meetings took place with the different groups of the agenda, and of course we would plan to be very supportive of the G20 presidency of India once the summit comes here. One of the things that I should add is that we're very happy to see that this is a very action-oriented agenda that India has proposed, because I think it's very important that we translate many of our commitments and many of our priorities into decisive measures that will be taken in very different issues, certainly those regarding development, financial stability, energy and climate change issues, as well as many others such as gender issues, women empowerment, tourism, agriculture, etc.
Okay, Ambassador. India has been made to walk a tightrope. India has put forth a very development-oriented, action-oriented agenda, but the Western Bloc wants India to have a debate or perhaps inclusion of Russia-Ukraine war. Even Moscow, while issuing a statement, said that we cannot have the Ukrainization of G20. And President Putin is not coming. He has his own domestic reasons. How do you look at this situation of India, especially in these times when India is hosting G20 Summit and when world is largely divided between the two blocs?
Well, it certainly is true that this has been a very challenging moment for the Indian presidency because of the conflict that is taking place in Europe. And obviously, and this is something that has been stated by many, the G20 is not where these issues are going to be resolved or are going to be, any proposal is going to come out that will resolve the issue. For that, we have the Security Council of the UN, the United Nations in general, and but of course it is a challenge that India has had to face. However, one thing that has been brought up in different discussions that have taken place in the working groups leading up to the summit is the impact that this conflict is having on a number of issues such as food security, energy supplies, the availability of fertilizers, financial stability, especially in questions of inflation. So I think that, and those are issues that are related to the development agenda. So it is, I think it is legitimate that these issues are discussed in the context of something that has been very disruptive of that stability. Okay.
Sir, India and Mexico has a lot of things in common: culture, food habits. We have a historical exchanges also. In 2016, it was announced that the relationship has been elevated to being a strategic partners. Both these countries represent the aspirations of Global South. India is perhaps focusing more on the issues of Global South. India did a summit also. India is speaking to the Pacific Island nations. India is also asking for the inclusion of African Union in G20 summit. India is talking about the issue of fertilizer, supply chain, food supply, all these agendas. Do you see, also, sir, there are a lot of Western countries which disagree with this idea of Global South. They say that there is nothing called Global South. How can you have a country like Singapore in Global South? Or perhaps, there are no common thing between the countries of Global South. This is what many Western countries say. when the leaders will sit on 9th and 10th in New Delhi, do you think there is going to be a disagreement when it comes to the agenda for the Global South? How do you look at it, and do you think the Para 3 and Para 4 are going to make things complicated for India?
Yeah, I think that India has done a remarkable job in actually bringing to the table the voice of what is called the Global South. But by probably once you said by whatever name you call it, we're talking about mostly the developing world, what used to be the South, or the Third World, as it was called many decades ago. But the idea, of course, that India has had is that it is important for the G20 to be more representative, to be more aware of the needs of the larger community, world community, so that some of its decisions and some of the outcome that emerge from the summit have a benefit not only the G20 countries, but have an impact, a positive impact across the board in the world community. So in that sense, I think that India's, for example, in January, the Prime Minister held a virtual meeting, a Global South summit with, I think, something like 125 countries. That was very important. So India has heard what those concerns are, and has brought them to the table, and I think that's very important, because we cannot work in a vacuum. And certainly countries like Mexico, like India, and others who are also part of the G20, we consider ourselves part of the Global South. So in that sense, we're working very much in sync. And as I said, I think it's very important that these concerns, that these priorities are at least heard. It doesn't mean that necessarily an agreement will be reached on some of these issues, but at least that they should be discussed, that we're attentive to the needs, because if we're going to be talking about, say, financial stability in the world, or about the consequences of climate change, or issues of food security, or health security, this is something that we need to be aware of. What is the situation around the world, not just within the countries of the G20. Coming to the issue of the two paragraphs that you mentioned, again, as I was saying before, we hope that this is what was agreed in Bali. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to turn out here at the summit, but again, this is something that cannot be taken in a vacuum. There is a conflict going on that has an impact and has an effect all over the world.
Okay. Thank you so much for speaking to CNN News 18. So we were having this exclusive chat with the ambassador of Mexico, and his position, his country's position is very clear. They are fully supporting India's presidency. They are also talking about the issues of Global South. But at the same time, they say that the Para 3 and Para 4 cannot be taken into vacuum, because a lot of things are being impacted, or perhaps are getting affected because of the war which is going on in Europe.